The year is 1983, and to some people, video games are dying. Once a blooming industry, now lie in ruins, and shelves are filled with cheap, discounted, and sometimes even broken cartridges. Families have stopped buying consoles, companies are starting to go bankrupt, and the video game fad, as they call it, is declared over. But then, out of the ashes, something strange appears. A strange little hero in red overalls. A hero who can run, jump, and break through worlds like never seen before. A game with music so catchy, you can hum it decades later after the game was created. A game that felt different and almost magical in some ways. Now at first, it was just another cartridge in a gray plastic box, but soon it became something far greater. This was a game that turned living rooms into playgrounds. The game that made children whisper about secret warp zones and hidden one-ups. The game that transformed a struggling company into a global giant. What you're about to see is the story of how one plumber, born from the imagination of a young designer in Japan, did the impossible and made the game that saved the industry. This is the story of Super Mario Bros. Our story begins not in the bright, cheerful Mushroom Kingdom, but in the smoky arcades of the early 1980s in Japan. Nintendo was already making waves in gaming. In 1981, the arcade hit Donkey Kong introduced the world to a character who was then nameless, a carpenter who could jump, and players simply called him Jumpman. He was small, simple, and made of a handful of pixels, yet he still stood out. Unlike the alien spaceships of Galaga or the yellow maze chomper of Pac-Man, Jumpman was actually human, and he had character. He had to climb, leap, and dodge barrels to save his girlfriend Pauline from a giant ape. Now this scrappy hero would later be renamed Mario, inspired by Mario Seagal, the landlord of Nintendo of America's warehouse whose fiery personality left an impression. But here's the key though. Mario wasn't designed to be famous. He was a practical solution to a problem. Shigeru Miyamoto, the young artist and designer behind Donkey Kong, had to work with extreme technical limitations. For example, drawing hair strand by strand was just impossible back then, so Mario wore a cap to eliminate that problem. As far as facial features, they didn't translate well into pixels, so he just got a mustache instead. And to tell his arms apart from his torso, Miyamoto dressed him in overalls. In other words, Mario's look wasn't fashion, it was survival. And yet, these limits gave him a timeless identity. Mario had already starred in Mario Bros., a simple arcade game featuring him and his brother Luigi, battling creatures in single-screen arenas. Now it was fun, but let's be real, it wasn't revolutionary. Meanwhile, something darker was happening in America, the video game crash of 1983. Industry giants like Atari had oversaturated the market with poor quality titles, including the infamous E.T. on the Atari 2600. Now let's stop it right here. I don't care what nobody says. E.T. was an awesome game. I mean, you kind of had to understand how to play the game, and once you figured it out, to me, I felt like it was a pretty good adaptation, at least back in the 2600 days. It was kind of an adventure, and it was actually quest lines and stuff you had to do in that game. I did make a video on that. Feel free to check it out, but I'm sorry. But I just hate it when everybody dumps on that game like it was the worst thing ever made. My opinion, though. Let's continue. Now, consumers lost faith because of E.T. Retailers stopped stocking games. By all accounts, the golden age of video games was over. But in Japan, Nintendo had other plans. The Famicom, short for Family Computer, was quietly becoming a massive hit. Shigeru Miyamoto and fellow designer Takashi Tezuka wanted to create something never seen before. A video game not limited to one screen, but a true adventure that scrolled seamlessly as you moved. The vision was simple but daring. Make a game where the player feels like they're traveling through different lands, from green fields to dark caves, from underwater ruins to fiery castles, a complete journey. So let's talk about how they built the Mushroom Kingdom. So Miyamoto drew inspiration from his own childhood in the countryside of Sonobe, Japan. According to Miyamoto, as a child, he explored caves, rivers, and fields, often finding small secrets in nature, like a hidden passage in the woods, or a strange tunnel under a bridge. So he wanted Super Mario Bros. To capture that same sense of wonder and discovery he felt long ago. Thus, the Mushroom Kingdom was born. A whimsical world of pipes, hidden blocks, and secret shortcuts that made kids feel like explorers. And the enemies were designed with only the utmost care. You had the Goombas, the very first enemy you meet, and they were created in a rush, literally a single sprite squashed down from a Koopa Troopa to save memory. Yet, that simple enemy taught millions of players their first lesson. Jump on this, or you die. And to go further, every element had a purpose. Nothing in the game was random. And it wasn't just all Miyamoto. Programmer Koji Kondo worked on the game's sound, becoming the first person at Nintendo solely dedicated to composing video game music. Its tunes would become as legendary as Mario himself, and Takashi Tezuka handled much more of the level design and story elements, shaping Princess Toadstool, Bowser, and the Magical Kingdom backdrop. And together, this small dedicated team at Nintendo poured their ideas into a project that on paper seemed risky. I mean, let's be real, who's going to care about a little plumber when the world thought video games were dying? But Miyamoto, as always, believed in it. If he could capture the joy of exploration, the thrill of discovery, and the satisfaction of overcoming obstacles, then players would fall in love all over again. And, spoiler, he was right. So the stage was set. Mario was ready to leave the arcade and step into homes across the world. But in 1985, releasing a video game wasn't so simple. The world wasn't waiting for another console. In fact, the world thought video games were finished at that point. Because in America, just 2 years earlier, shelves were littered with unwanted cartridges. Parents and kids alike had been burned by games like E.T. and Pac-Man on Atari 2600, and retailers really wanted nothing to do with video games at the time. Stores that once carried racks of big cartridges were practically giving them away in a bargain bin. And I can attest to this. This is true. I remember going to Kmart back in the day, and this is probably right around that time frame, 1984-ish. And it had a bargain bin at Kmart. It was just a big bargain bin and pretty much littered with a big bin, and every game in there was 99 cents. It was Atari 2600 games primarily, but it was games that I hadn't even heard of. Like, I can't even think of the random names of the games, but they were just, Atari library is actually pretty big, but most people who played Atari back in the day, you have your fan favorites that you love, and there might be a couple of obscure games here and there, but Atari had tons of games that to this day I've never played and even heard of. So it was basically a free-for-all. If you had $10, you're walking out with 10 games, saved with tax. But that's pretty much what it was. $20, 20 games, because they couldn't give those things away. They were so bad and oversaturated in the market. True story. So for Nintendo, trying to sell this system in America was very hostile territory. Now, the Famicom was doing well in Japan, but the main question was, could lightning strike twice overseas? To succeed, Nintendo had to do more than just sell a game. They had to change how people thought about video games. And Nintendo had a knockout strategy: disguise the console. When Nintendo of America brought the Famicom to the US, they rebranded it as the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now notice when I say the word entertainment system, they didn't call it a video game console. That phrase at the time was toxic. So instead of selling it as a toy for kids, they packaged it as a futuristic entertainment device. They added peripherals like the Zapper light gun and even a robot assistant called ROB, which stands for Robotic Operating Buddy. But as cool as these gadgets were, that's not what made the Nintendo a success. Now, just to showcase to you how great Nintendo products are and how great they were, this Rob the Robot here is my Rob the Robot from 1987. This is actual legit launch for me, because Nintendo came in a couple of flavors. Had the entertainment system with just Mario pack in, and then you can get the Mega Bundle where it had Rob the Robot and the Light Zapper, but you didn't get Mario, you got Gyromite and Duck Hunt. And this is actually from 1987, so this guy's old. And I just put batteries in it. I lost all the parts to him, of course. I don't have the parts, but he still works 40 years later, almost 40 years. So yeah, Nintendo definitely made some high stellar products. So yeah, that's pretty awesome. So the secret weapon we're talking about? Enter Super Mario Bros. Released in Japan on September 13, 1985, Super Mario Bros. Quickly became the best-selling Famicom title. But when Nintendo launched the NES in North America, they made a crucial decision: bundle this system with Super Mario Bros. So it wasn't just another pack-in game, it was the reason for you to buy the system. Kids would unwrap the box, plug in their NES, and suddenly find themselves in World 1-1. A bright green field, a blue sky, a block floating in the air, and a strange mushroom-shaped enemy walking toward them. And at the time, it was unlike anything seen before. The screen scrolled smoothly as Mario ran forward, the physics made his jumps feel natural, and you could actually control the range of his jump. And the music was catchy and alive, and this tune would stick with people easily over the next few decades. And the adventure stretched across 8 full worlds, a staggering length compared to the quick arcade loops players were used to at the time. And the word of mouth spread fast: schoolyard legends and secret worlds. Within weeks, Super Mario Bros. Became more than just a game. It became a playground conversation piece. As school kids whispered about secrets they discovered, secrets like the warp zones, the minus world, the infinite one-up trick, all kinds of stuff like that. And for the first time, video games weren't just personal experiences. They were actually turned into social events. Mario at the time, at least in video games anyway, had become a common language among kids across the country. And as far as commercial success and reception, the reviews, they were smashing the reviews. Magazines praised the game's length, variety, and polish, and critics called it a masterpiece, setting a new gold standard for what a video game could be. And for the sales, they were astronomical back in the day. By 1987, the NES totally dominated homes across America, with Super Mario Bros. Leading the charge. And by the end of its run, it sold over 40 million copies, a record that stood for decades. So this wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. So let's jump real quick into the gameplay. So the magic of Super Mario Bros. Begins from the very moment you press start. The sky fades in, and then there he is, standing at the far left of the screen, and you get no words, no tutorial, no guide, and yet somehow you instinctively know just what to do in the game. And World 1-1 to me is like the perfect lesson. It's like the starter to let you know, kind of give you a feeling how to play the game. And at the time, and for me, World 1-1 is kind of one of those, your introductory level where it kind of tells you how to play the game. And doesn't really tell you, but it kind of gives you a little bit of everything. You do have easy enemies. You do have a star for invincibility on that stage. You do have one pipe you can go down. It does have a hidden extra man. So it kind of does a little bit of everything in that very first level to give you and to set the pace for the whole game to come. And I thought that was huge. A lot of people miss that, but I feel like that's a big deal just to let you know pretty much what you'll encounter throughout the game. Now, this is Nintendo, and like I said, this is Nintendo's genius, designing a tutorial hidden inside the fun. No text, no instructions, just complete discovery. And you had your power-ups in the game, and that gave you a sense of progression. I mean, the Super Mushroom was revolutionary at the time. It gave players a sense of progression. So you weren't just playing the same sprite through 8 worlds, you were evolving and changing up your character. You had the Fire Flower to expand the idea even further, letting you throw fireballs at enemies. And suddenly Mario wasn't just surviving, he was actually fighting back. And then of course you had the Starman with this iconic tune, and when the invincibility theme kicked in, players felt unstoppable. Because literally you were. I mean, you could still fall off stuff, but for the most part you could run through anything. And it was great to get through those like trickier parts that you need the invincibility. We had like tough enemies like Hammer Brothers. So the star came right on time lots of times. And where did they get the theme from the Mushroom Kingdom? Well, in Japan, the mushroom wasn't just an idea out of nowhere. In Japanese folklore, mushrooms are often symbolized as magical transformations. So Miyamoto tapped into that, childhood cultural image he had, and he turned it into something universal for kids around the world to experience. And also it seemed like every enemy in Super Mario Bros. Was designed to teach you something. I mean, Goombas taught you to jump. Koopa Troopers introduced the idea of shells sliding across the ground, showing you both danger and opportunity to get some one-ups. And then the Piranhas, each one teaching you timing, so you just can't rush down every pipe. You gotta wait for the Piranha plant to come up. And then you have the technical, probably one of the harder enemies in the game, the Hammer Brothers, and they kind of taught you advanced dodging, forcing you to think vertically instead of just left and right. So nothing, in my opinion, was wasted. Every placement, every challenge was there for a reason. And then you had secrets and mystery. That's what truly made Super Mario Bros. Unforgettable. There were secrets and even some glitches. Scattered all throughout the game, you had hidden coin blocks, pipes that led underground, and vine blocks that sent you climbing up into the sky. And of course, you had the warp zone. Now, the first time a kid stumbled into the warp zone in level 1-2, skipping all the way to world 4, it was like uncovering forbidden knowledge. I mean, these just weren't shortcuts, they were like revolutionary at the time. And this mystery gave the game on some small level game mythology. And then you top off each world with a castle. So every 4th level ended in the castle, and the mood shifted instantly. You have the dark white, you have the dark gray bricks, you have lava pits, fire bars spinning in deadly rhythms, and at the end you had Bowser, or at least what looked like Bowser. I mean, they were Bowsers, but they were kind of fake. So when you hit it, you kill that version of Bowser. Only on level 8 is when you fight the real Bowser. When you kill the other ones, they turn upside down. If you shot them, they usually with the fire, you can see they turn into like some kind of a monster. Sometimes they'd be a Goomba, sometimes they'd be a Buzzy Beetle or something like that, but they were fake Bowser. So after you defeated them, sometimes by fireball, sometimes by cutting the bridge, and then be greeted by Toad's now legendary line, "Thank you, Mario, but our princess is in another castle." And I always thought these Toads looked like Strawberry Shortcake. If you were back in the 80s and you remember Strawberry Shortcake, I always thought these guys modeled after her, but they didn't. But they just kind of reminded me of her in some way. So what's cool about Mario is some of the physics. I mean, Mario, like I said earlier, doesn't just jump, he arcs. So you can actually control, the momentum when he's running, and he slows down when he stops. So you can have a weird trajectory on your jump. Sometimes you can jump and slide forward. You can have sliding jumps and so forth. So these subtle details make Mario more alive and just not feel mechanical like other, characters did in other games. And because of that, players liked that they were mastering movement, not just button pressing. So the 8 worlds of Mario Bros. Weren't just levels, each were lands and had their own themes. Grassy fields, underground caves, underwater challenges, sky levels, and fiery castles. So this variety gave the sense of a true adventure, and for 1985, that was unheard of. Unlike the arcade games where levels repeated endlessly, here you actually felt progression, a story. Each stage had one step closer to the final goal, rescuing Princess Toadstool from the clutches of Bowser. Now, one thing I want to talk about real quick is the Minus World, and this is something that a lot of people today, to this day, that play Super Mario Bros. Don't even know what the Minus World is. So I'll show you real quick and I'll explain to you. When people say the Minus World, this is what they're talking about. Now, one of the most famous mysteries of Super Mario Bros. Is the Minus World, a glitch level that felt like stumbling into a forbidden secret. To access it, players had to perform a strange maneuver in World 1-2. By breaking the second to the last brick of the exit pipe and carefully clipping into the wall, Mario could trick the game into sending him into a hidden warp zone. But instead of taking you forward, it transported you to a bizarre underworld stage labeled -1 or minus. Now, at first, it looks like the normal underwater level, music and all. But soon, players realize something unsettling. The Minus World has no exit. I mean, it has an exit, but all it does is loop you endlessly, with Mario swimming forever through identical passages until the timer ran out and he eventually drowned. And for kids in the 1980s, the Minus World felt almost creepy in some ways, like you had broke through the surface of the game into a place you actually weren't supposed to be. It added an extra aura of mystery to Super Mario Bros. That still is a big deal today. And then one of my favorite parts, and it's a subtle thing, but I did enjoy the underwater levels for the simple fact that, yeah, we had some games where you'd swim in the water, but this one made it cool because you were actually going into water and you'd actually lose gravity. So you had to actually mash the button every time to jump, and you actually took on those water mechanics and some of the enemies they had. And the music for that was iconic. And then just a little small detail with the bubbles coming up. Now, I'm not gonna say Mario was the first one to jump in the water and swim, but he just did it, in my opinion, in 1986, because that's when I played it, 1986, 1987 timeframe. It was such a big deal to have that on a home console with that level of detail. So yeah, that was huge. That's just something I want to shout out. Probably one of my favorite music in the game is definitely the underwater level. And speaking of music, let's talk about it real quick. Music and the sound design. If gameplay is the heart of Super Mario Bros., then its music is the soul. And that soul was crafted by one man, Koji Kondo. In 1984, Nintendo hired Koji to work on music for their upcoming games. And this was groundbreaking. He was the first ever composer at Nintendo hired specifically for sound and design. Before that, most game soundtracks were simple beeps and loops, made only to fill silence. But Kondo saw music as storytelling. He wanted the soundtrack to live with the player, to match their emotions and movements on screen. And with the Famicom's limited sound chip, just 3 music channels and 1 sound effect channel, he had to be creative. And let's talk about the overall theme. That one is an instant classic. The first note players hear when World 1-1 begins are totally unforgettable. I mean, you hear that sound, 40 years later, and it's still iconic. I mean, you only gotta be a gamer to know. You hear it, you know it's Mario. There's no mistaking it to be anything else. And something to be that powerful and the game to be that legendary, that's a big staple point. So yeah, when you hear that theme, it's definitely Mario. And through all the Mario games that will come after that, they've redone that tune, rehashed that tune over and over and recreated in so many ways. So yes, that is definitely Mario's iconic tune. Can't mistake it for anything. And legends have it that Kondo actually tested his music by playing the game on mute, then layering in tracks to see if they matched Mario's movements. If it didn't feel natural, he threw it out and started over. Or so legend has it. Anyway, so when players first descended into the underground pipe, the music shifted. Suddenly the bright melody was gone, replaced by a deep, repetitive bass line. And the underground theme felt darker and more mechanical. And what's cool about this transition was it's almost like the music talked to you. Just you're not in the safety of the surface anymore. We're underground, so things are about to get real. I mean, that was huge just to be able to do that. And then the underwater theme, one of my favorites. I mean, a dreamy waltz in my opinion. And lastly, we had the castle themes. And here Kondo kind of stripped the melody down, using tense, staccato notes that repeated ominously, and it built suspense as the fire bars grew bigger in later castle levels and spun faster, and a lava bubble would pop up randomly, and you knew at the end Bowser was waiting. So by the time you reached the bridge, your pulse was already racing because of the music. And then the iconic sounds throughout the game. You had the ding of collecting coins, the boing of Mario jumping, and the triumphant fanfare of grabbing the flagpole at the end. I mean, and lastly, who could forget the magical jingle of the 1-up? So this was an all-around total package and a masterclass in sound effects and music. So what kind of cultural impact did Super Mario Bros. Have? Well, when Super Mario Bros. Hit living rooms, it wasn't just a hit game, it was the birth of a global phenomenon. And Mario wasn't just trapped inside the TV screen on a system, he jumped into every corner of culture, transforming video games from a passing fad into a permanent part of our lives. In the mid-1980s, Nintendo had a breakout hit on their hands. But what made Super Mario Bros. Different was it wasn't just a successful game, it actually created a gaming mascot. Mario was instantly recognizable. A short, cheerful plumber with red overalls became the face of Nintendo and eventually the face of gaming itself, at least at the time. And no longer was he the generic Jumpman from Donkey Kong. Now, he was a full-fledged character with personality, adventures, and a kingdom to protect. And the shift was monumental. Before Mario, few video game characters become household names. Now, that's not to say all of them are like that. Of course, you had Pac-Man, big games like that. But to me, Pac-Man was more popular and a household name, yes. But to me, he was more of a symbol of gaming as opposed to a character with depth. So on one hand, you have Mario with a storyline, depth, and a whole bunch of characters. And on the other hand, you have Pac-Man, who's actually just as important in some ways, but he was more a symbol of gaming. When you saw an arcade, you saw Pac-Man outside. He screams arcade. Mario screams iconic mascot. So, I mean, if that makes any sense, guys, but that to me, that's just kind of felt. Pac-Man is very important, and we will definitely cover him in a video coming up shortly. I feel like he had a much different role in the arcade genre. He's more arcade and Mario's more bridging over into the console area. But both of these iconic characters definitely have their place in video game history. And speaking further of legacy, I remember like back in the day, back in 1987 anyway, junior high school, Nintendo was a big deal. I mean, of course, back in the day you had Atari, and you had like Atari, people talk about Atari games somewhat, if you like video games and you were kind of one of the nerds who would talk about games. Yeah, Atari, people did talk about Atari, but when Nintendo came, you have even some of the cool kids, like some of the jocks, some of the football players, excited, at least at my school anyway, to talk about, video games. It still wasn't a big deal. I mean, in high school, nobody's gonna talk about video games unless you want to get beat up and thrown in the trash can. At least back in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, we just didn't do that if you want to get any girls. But Nintendo was so huge and so new at the time that it was that brief window where it was cool to actually, I mean, even some of the females at school, some of the ones, some of the nice looking, the females with prestige, they would even talk about Nintendo. It was actually cool to own Nintendo because it was so new. It was such a big deal at the time. So yeah, it was actually a big deal. So stories did go about Mario, of course, because everybody had Mario. That was the pack-in game, unless you had big money and got the deluxe edition. But if you got the regular one, you got Mario. So there was nothing like it and nothing that compared to it at the time. And Nintendo quickly realized Mario wasn't just a game character. He was actually a brand. And that led to toys and plushies. You had Mario and Luigi action figures hit the store shelves. Kids begging parents for Mario dolls, lunch boxes, bed sheets. And then you had the cartoon, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. That brought Mario to television. Now I watched it as a kid. I enjoyed it because it was Mario. It was Nintendo. It was video games. I enjoyed it. And looking back at it now, oh my God, some parts were cringe on that show. You had Captain Lou Albano, the wrestling manager from back in the day. But Captain Lou kind of did some acting back then. He played the role of Mario. But the cartoon was kind of like the game, but they kind of had their own personalities. Mario was kind of goofy in that one, I thought. But it was still a cool concept that they actually crossed over and had that story. He had that bad thing. I'm not even gonna do it because I'm too embarrassed to even do it. But he had that Mario step he would do. I don't got the courage to do it on film. It's so cringe. But if you were around at that time and you watched that show, take one step and then again, I can't even get through it so bad. But it was just fun at the time in the 80s to actually experience that. So yeah, they went on to even have its own show, and the show was cool because it had Mario Brothers 1 through 4. Oh no, 1 through 4. Monday through Thursday, and Friday at the end they would have Zelda, and it was that one was really cringe, and we'll talk about that when we cover Legend of Zelda coming up in a future video real soon as well. It was just that one was cringe. Excuse me, princess. Yeah, it was god awful, but we'll talk more about that later. But anyway, it did establish its own show, and that was huge back in the day. Then it went on to comics and books. Mario appeared in Nintendo's own comic magazines and storybooks, and then your boy even had a cereal. Yes, Mario even had breakfast cereal. Nintendo Cereal System. And this was cool concept because what it was, it split into 2 bags. One bag was Super Mario Brothers and had like Super Mario Brothers flavor and little shapes of Mario stuff. And the other one had The Legend of Zelda. And I remember the bad commercial for it, Nintendo, it's a cereal for breakfast. I mean, it was cringe as it is now. At the time, it was cool. You wanted to go out and get you some Nintendo cereal. I mean, Nintendo was on top of the world, and it was just an awesome time. And Mario Brothers, in my opinion, kind of was pioneering that thing, especially with the release of new Mario games they would have. But the original OG Mario, Super Mario Bros. I should say, definitely was the catalyst for all this. And lastly, and we have to talk about it, the movie and all the horror and terror that came with it. By the early 1990s, Mario was so popular that Hollywood came calling. Now that's when you know you made it. The result was the 1993 live-action Super Mario Bros. Movie, a film infamous for its dark, bizarre take on the Mushroom Kingdom. And critics panned this thing. Fans were confused, and even Nintendo distanced themselves so far away from this ridiculous movie. I mean, yet the movie is still a testament to Mario's cultural weight at the time. Video game characters almost never got a movie adaptations back in the day, and Mario was the first to break through that barrier, even if the result was strange. This movie was some movies are so bad they're good. Street Fighter the movie, terrible movie, but it's actually good because it's so much bad stuff in it, but there's so many things to make fun of and make the movie cool. Same thing in some ways can be said about the Double Dragon movie. Really, really bad, but I mean, it had its moments. If I'm being 100% honest with you here, I feel like this movie had no moments. Not no moments. And what scared me when they said they were coming up with this last Super Mario Bros. Movie they had, I was petrified to watch it. I was like, how are they going to pull this off? Just because Mario's adaptation to Hollywood and cartoons is usually pretty bad. But this time around, I feel like they actually got it right. I totally enjoyed the Super Mario Bros. Movie they just came out with a couple years ago, last year or whatever. I remember seeing that one at home, and then Netflix, you could rent it. I remember having it. I remember my kids went and saw it at the movie theater, but I ended up seeing it at home on Netflix. You could rent it on Netflix or whatever, or Prime, might have been Prime, but whatever it was on. And I was blown away with, they actually pulled it off. They actually reeled me in where it was actually, a very, very good movie. So yeah, hats off to them for saving that franchise, because it's always kind of weird when you make Mario movies, but this one, they knocked out the park. So I'm looking forward to that new Super Mario Bros. Movie. I hear they're making another one. So definitely want to check that out. But yeah, it was so big, it even got its own movie. So like even as bad as it was, the fact that Mario had that kind of clout to get a movie deal back in 1993, a video game of anything, that's huge. And another powerful part with Mario is its global language. And what I mean by that is perhaps one of the most powerful impacts of Super Mario Bros. Is it's universal. I mean, it doesn't matter if you grew up in New York, Tokyo, London, Sao Paulo, everyone knew Mario. The Super Mario Bros. Theme song became a kind of global anthem, played on pianos, guitars, even ringtones. In fact, when the Olympics were held in Tokyo in 2021, Mario himself appeared in the closing ceremony, proof that decades later, he remains Japan's most recognizable export. So what do I think about Super Mario Bros.? I really can't say enough about this game. I feel like the first one was so cool. I mean, my first experience with Mario was obviously Donkey Kong in arcades, but as far as Super Mario Bros. For the NES, my buddy had one. He lived in like a ritzier part of our neighborhood, and I remember he said, "Hey man, we went to the store, we got some candy or whatever." He said, "Hey man, want to come and play Nintendo?" I didn't know what Nintendo even was at the time. Actually, I thought we were just gonna play Atari, because that's normally what I would do. I'd go to his house and play Atari after school and whatnot. And he had a Nintendo, and he had Mario. And the first time I played it, because I had never seen it, I know they had Mario versus arcade version, but I'd never seen it in arcade at the time or anything like that. And that's another story for another time. But anyway, I played it. I remember having the controller, because the controller at the time, they did have other controllers, like, they had flat surfaces with 2 buttons, but that was the Nintendo controller was was like the gray color and the red buttons that popped on it, and the fact that you could pause the game whenever, and the difference of night and day from going from Atari 2600 to the Nintendo. And then he only had like Super Mario Bros. I think he had like I don't even know if he had any other games. I think he just had Mario. So I played it for about 10 minutes. I had enough time for one game before his mom came home or whatever. And it was actually pretty cool, because I got to the World 1-2, and like I said earlier, it was instantly, even though I had never played the game before, you still had the concept of what you were supposed to do throughout the game. And just the graphics on that thing, I was totally 100% like blown away by the magic. And I was so jealous of him. I was like, man, this dude gets to sit here and play, because he kind of took it for granted. He was like, oh, this is playing Nintendo like it wasn't a big deal. For me, that was everything. That was everything to play just that little bit. And yeah, so the fact that I'm also jealous of this kid that he got to sit here and play this game whenever he wanted, could pause it, come back to it. I mean, those are just features that the Atari 2600, Atari 5200, you could pause the game. So pausing wasn't a new feature, but it was rare. Every console really couldn't do it at the time. And since I played mostly Atari 2600, the fact that you could pause the game was a big concept. And some Nintendo games were weird. You'd pause the game and you'd lose all the graphics, but Mario was one of those games, and a lot of the games back in the day, when you hit pause on them, you could actually freeze frame what you're looking at. So if you wanted to look at the graphics on it, you could actually freeze frame it by pausing it. So that was a big deal back in the day. So overall, my first impression of it was chef's kiss. I mean, I have to get this system, and I wouldn't get it till the following year or two in 1987. So I remember Christmas for me, 1987, that's when I ended up getting, and I was pissed off. I mean, don't get me wrong, Christmas 1987 probably being my favorite. Second favorite being Christmas 1985 when I got the Transformers Constructicons Devastator gift box and got all the Constructicons. That goes as a close second, but 1987 was the best because I ended up getting the Nintendo that year, and I got the Etch-a-Sketch animator, if you know what that is. It was an electronic Etch-a-Sketch. The story for another time, but anyway. So yeah, that was huge. But in that pack-in, we ended up getting Duck Hunt. We ended up getting the Light Zapper, which was huge, and Rob the Robot. And then so after Christmas Day, you know, next couple of days, we went and got 2 more games, and I'll never forget, we got Castlevania and we got Pro Wrestling. So we had 4 games all together. So best time ever in 1987 for me with the Nintendo Entertainment System. I'll never forget that Christmas. It was like huge. I don't think you can never recreate that. It was this huge part of my childhood. So, but yeah, but I was talking about Mario. I feel like Mario was so good back in the day because it had like, it did a lot of firsts. You know, it gave you a whole adventure. It was side-scrolling, and it had side-scrolling games in arcades, but this one was one you could play at home, and it took you through 8 worlds. Now, let's be real. Worlds 1 through 4, worlds 4 through 8, or worlds 5 through 8, they're just a little harder, so there are a lot of differences. And I go with the memory constraints, but there are a lot of similarities from worlds 1 through 4 as opposed to 5 through 8, but the 5 through 8 levels are just harder, and there are some major changes, but for the most part they're the same, in my opinion, the same 2 worlds, one tier being harder than the other. Another cool fact that they put in that game was the fact, which was brand new to me at the time, the fact when you're in some of the castles later on, you have to go through a certain sequence to get to Bowser at the end. You can't just go straight through it, and otherwise it throw you to the beginning of the loop, so you had to figure out where to go, and that was a big deal back then. I mean, for me anyway, that was unheard of. I didn't have games where you had to go through a certain way and couldn't get through. I mean, Adventure, if you want to count Adventure for the 2600, but even still, it did have an ending where to go. It was no resetting or re-looping you, but this game did, so that was a big deal. The fact that it had warp zones where you could actually, that was a new concept to me. The fact that it was so many hidden secrets throughout the game, like the invisible blocks, the invisible one-up blocks, the hidden coins throughout, and it had a nice cast of not too many characters, but a nice cast of characters and epic music. So overall, this was a masterclass, a masterpiece of a game, and there's a reason why Super Mario Brothers, or Mario and his whole cast of characters, and even the additional characters you have later on, would spin off to countless Mario sequels and spin-offs. So I mean, this was definitely, in my opinion, and it can be argued, but I'd say in my opinion, the game that saved gaming for the 80s. I mean, this was definitely the bridge and the glue that gave Nintendo the momentum to bleed forward and kind of bring everything else back in full circle, with Sega being revitalized as far as consoles go, with competition, because you always have to have competition when you want to build something. So if the Nintendo never would have came, there's no telling where we'd be. So Nintendo definitely, thumbs up in my opinion. Now, some people aren't going to agree with that, but I feel like everybody's going to have their opinion about what happened in the mid 80s. But I feel like Nintendo was definitely a big part of revitalizing and bringing the home consoles back. Now, arcades will come back later, and there's some big heavy hitters in arcades like Double Dragon and Street Fighter 2, and they would revitalize the arcades. But to revitalize, get a fresh, breath into video games in the Americas anyway, I definitely give that accolade to Nintendo and Mario. So, but that's gonna do it for Super Mario Brothers. I know everybody, like I said, if you're not a gamer, everybody's played Mario at least once, some version of Mario, whether it be Mario Kart, whatever. You've played Mario before, or even watched one of the bad cartoons or the movies, so whatever. But let me know your experience with Mario. And what I'm doing here on this channel is this is the Arc era we're doing right now. So we're covering like the old school icons right now. So we have, in this arc, we have Mario, of course, Mario Brothers. Next up, we'll have Zelda. I'm working on a Zelda video for you guys. The OG, not going into Link of the Past or anything like that yet. We'll get to those, but right now we're doing, we'll have Legend of Zelda for you. We have a Donkey Kong video for you guys, arcade, a deep dive into that. And of course, Castlevania. So these are our basic ones, and we'll try to cover these arcs. I already got them mapped out, so we do have a, I am trying to get some structure to this channel, to just throwing random stuff out. So right now we're going through the old school right now. So stay tuned for those to come in the future, because those are the ones I'm working on next. So with that, guys, thank you for going on this deep dive with me into and bringing us some good memories here with Mario. This is a golden age of console gaming, in my opinion, as far as Nintendo, this is definitely one of their brightest moments in gaming history. That's gonna do it for me. And as always, guys, take care of yourself, protect your peace. God bless you, and catch you next video. Thanks for watching.